Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome. Eileen, Julian, Jessica, welcome. I am going to have people mute just so that we don't get feedback noise. We always want to hear from you, but we'll mute just as we're kind of getting rolling here. So welcome, everybody. I'm Karen Dahl. I think I know most of you. But I just wanted to start with just a little gratitude and appreciation for those of you that have reached out on the side and that I've had some kind of get to know you meetings with. Those have been really fruitful and generative, and I hope that you're all doing those with each other because this is intended to be a community of practice and a reciprocity circle. So if you need people's contact information you don't have it, feel free to reach out to me. We are super excited to have FAWaLiKhan join us today, and a number of people have reached out and wanting to make sure they get the recording. So I am recording this if they're not able to make the call. So I'm going to just start with an intro on Ali, and then I will turn it over to him. He is the CEO and founder at Shape and will be showcasing their journey, the issues they faced, how they turned to the science to find answers, and a hands-on demo of the survey questions and actual reports and insights they're providing to help accelerate flourishing. Ellie has worked extensively and globally in the technology and medical diagnostics worlds before driving global insurers AXA's well-being services as Chief Innovation Officer for nearly a decade. More recently, he pioneered measurement of global mental health, developing the AXA Mind Health Index, reporting on over 120 determinants, and now in its third year with over 7.2 million data points, powering corporate and government policy. At Shape, Ellie's work is to help employers unlock the power of flourishing workplaces, reporting on diverse topics through powerful indices that encourage support with care, empowerment, and positive change. He lives in the UK with his wife and 3 children and is trying to control his love of food, chasing too many ideas at the same time. There is no shortage of ideas, that is for sure. He's an active participant in our Human Flourishing group and others within the ecosystem. And his organization, Shape Global, undertook the immense effort to measure flourishing at work by starting with the science, identifying the workplace conditions and behaviors that most impact work performance and productivity through extensive literature research over 4 years, including statistical analysis and development of multiple indices. They proceeded to structure all this into a simple-to-use platform. Survey employees, instant results for employees, advancing reporting and tools for management, track changes, and succeed faster. Deployed now in multiple countries, they're helping employees and employers understand how well they're flourishing in 100 essentials drivers that help them perform. So everybody, hopefully you are cognitively alert today to hear Ali share his measure. I will go on mute and turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you. Some familiar faces. So nice to see all of you. This all makes me sound way smarter and more accomplished than I am. I'm far too much of a doofus for that, I can tell you. But somewhere along the way, we've done something, I think, really incredible. And the most incredible thing we've done, we stumbled upon the world of flourishing. And that's the common connection that we have here. So today I'll try my best to walk you through a visual experience of Shape, so you can really understand more about that. But I want to tell a little bit about the story about how we got there as well, and the world we came from. So I've got a couple of slides to show you, and then I want to leave enough time at the end for a good, robust question and answer session. So please, as you're going through, scribble some questions and don't give me an easy time, is what I say, right? I always like a bit of a challenge. Well, why did you do that? And how did you find this? So everything goes. All right. So I will share my screen, and I'll try and do my best to navigate through some of these because a few odd things are going on in my on here. And here we go. I think that's good to go. Let me just check that you can see my screen here. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Kimberly. Okay, right. Has anybody actually said this? Want some flourishing? Because one of the things I've noticed within the wonderful network that we've got in and around Harvard and the effort is we talk a lot about flourishing, but how about getting some of it? And then how about giving some of it? And that's what I sat there in last night looking at this and I thought, what should I call it? So yeah, anybody want some flourishing? You know, right now there are people that we know, people in our workplaces who are struggling. And some of them are striving to get to a better place. And a whole bunch of them are flourishing. And there are telltale signs of how they look, and there are signals to how they behave. That's what we've been really getting into. And some of those elements that we can see here, they are impacting a person every single day when they look at whether they're in a positive culture, are they supported, do they have the right resources around them, are they adapting well, do they have regular reviews, are they achieving what they need to? But equally, they're being impacted with some negative forces as well. There's illness, there's poor commitment, confrontation, discrimination, conflict, workload. These are things that are very prevalent every single day. And this is just some of them that I think just touch upon kind of a drop in the ocean compared to the experiences that we have every day. So we know this is fundamentally at the heart of what we really need to unpack if we're going to help give everybody the empowerment that they need to get to the right place called flourishing. So years ago, we asked ourselves three fundamental questions. What affects work? How much? And why? So a little bit about me first. So whilst I've been building Shape, it was a 4.5 year study period that we knew was going to take us time because we wanted to do it properly. And we actually shunned away from taking an investment in order to keep the purity of the academic rigor behind what we're doing. Because thanks to the capital markets, and that's great what they do, but the investors really wanted speed. And what we wanted to do was to do this in the right way. So we'll come on to more about that. And that's why it's been a 6-year journey. And we've only really just recently emerged and started to make some quick wins. For the last couple of years, I was actually the CTO and then Chief Science Innovation Officer for an organization called AXA in the Wellbeing Unit. So for those of you who don't know AXA, AXA is based in nearly 60 countries around the world. It is the largest single branded insurance company in the world. By assets under management, it's the third largest in the world. So it's pretty big. And I learned a lot of things over there, not just about the science of well-being, but before that, I brought to it my medical devices experience from a company called Alere. And so I hung out with the people that created the way that we measure diabetes using the glucometer. Literally, my old boss created that machine and gifted that to the world. And so 3 things, just as a quick takeaway from here. I've gone through a period of my life where it wasn't healthy because I got absolutely obsessed about infectious and chronic diseases, how they operate inside the body, what actually happens at the degradation level, literally at that molecular level as well. I had to learn, I felt like I had to go back to school and learn biology from scratch because I came from data and information systems rather than biology. But when those 2 things merged together, I started to realize we had to interrogate and understand why we're making the changes we are. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, but I'm proud to have built with and for AXA and led the project on what became, I believe, the largest mental health study and index in the insurance space. It is certainly by far one of the candidates for the most accurate in the world. 16 countries, we measured the mental health of entire nations and reported that back. And then I am super proud about being involved in not just the Harvard program, but just within the ecosystem of Flourishing. Next year, there will be a big publishing series of events around the findings that Tyler's work has found. And what we've been doing at Shape, as you'll see, is we've been going much deeper and broader along the way. So we're super proud to be in the system so we can share more. And that's the whole idea here as well. Little bit about Shape. So I first stumbled upon Flourishing when we had to articulate where are people in their mental health. And we use scored systems. When you build an index, you're building fundamentally a score. We use a score from 0 all the way to 100. But it didn't feel quite right to be able to classify people, human beings, as a number. So we needed to find a way to articulate that in a much, much more emotive and human way. And we came across Corey Keyes' model when we were studying different ways of expressing scored systems. And in Corey's model, you go from all the way from the negative aspects of struggling and languishing and all the way through to flourishing. We really liked that a lot, but we didn't quite take the whole model as he had floundering as well. We didn't feel that was a nice way to really talk about at a human level when you are interfacing individuals. Who would like to know that particular thing? So we decided to actually align with a measurement model that was struggling, languishing, getting by, or flourishing in your mental health. That was amazing in terms of the reception that we had around the world. And being as part of one of the largest insurer groups in the world, you can imagine flourishing became a vernacular that grew there quite nicely and still quite unique. But we asked the question, are you fit to flourish? Do you have yourself and the attributes around you that you need to flourish in the right place to achieve that? Now, we collected about 120, 130 data points per person, and we published that data. So if anybody would like to read some of the white papers and the reports, I'm sure, Karen, if you could share those with the guys afterwards in the follow-up, you'll find some fast links to some of the work over there. So I'm going to just call out one example from a report that we put together in the world of work and flourishing. Now, we asked ourselves the question, are younger people flourishing in their mental health? And are they coping in the right way using the necessary skills that are required in order to flourish in their mental health? This is in the context of mental health. And so what we found was, if you look at the left-hand side, I'll just navigate you through this. Look at the left-hand side, younger employees are the least likely to be flourishing. You can see that down there. 18 to 24-year-olds don't have necessarily the skills that are required in order to interface great flourishing. And as you climb up, you have a natural inclination towards being able to flourish. We think of it as being wisdom, being able to handle some of the pressures of life, for example. So we've got 10 key skills that we looked at, and the top 6 that came through: self-acceptance, optimism, meaning and purpose, pride, self-confidence, and emotional intelligence. We found that when we looked at those people within the large cohort data set, there's about 7.2 million data points, by the way, so pretty big. When they had the acquisition of those skills or prevalence of those skills, we could see that each skill one by one was helping a person literally drive up their chance of flourishing statistically. In fact, it's so good when you take the 39% and attach it back into the original finding, you could be the second best group. So acquisition of skills really, really is super important. And we started to dial down into and had to pause on the work of which skill gave you the biggest possible probability of increase. And so we found that linking skills back into your chances of flourishing was an incredible way to look at this story. This data set is so powerful, it's now being used by the OECD for putting together government policy paper around the world. And that's the other thing that we've done. We have an incredible level of academic rigor behind what we're doing. And I can tell you the OECD, they don't behave like the academics. There are many, many steps ahead. So if we come back to what Shape is doing with this, in our world, we're asking the question, how do you get to higher performance and how do you do it faster? Now, I'm going to be honest with ourselves here. When you go to employers, you take all the nice things apart. What they're really after is performance and productivity. And they want it there as quickly as possible. That's what they're paying for. They want us to be present, less absent. They want to retain us, and they want to empower us in order to perform. So if that's what they want, how do we help them achieve that? And that was one of the fundamental questions that we tried to answer. So we found that in Flourishing. But to really understand that, we had to create a definition of flourishing at work because we couldn't find an official one published anywhere. For us, it's people reaching their fullest potential through the conditions and behaviors that enable optimal performance, fulfillment, and growth. So it's the conditions and behaviors we've got to measure, and that's what Shape does. It measures the conditions and the behaviors of the experiences that people have in the work environment. So what are we measuring? We're measuring 12 dimensions. We call them explorers. And the reason is because we want everybody to explore their relationship with their work and those people around them, those conditions and behaviors, by looking at their commitment to the company, their engagement, and the dynamic they have with their co-workers. And as you start to look all the way around, we're getting down into culture. The business essentials are actually borrowed heavily from the work that was done by McKinsey around their 7S framework. So we took those and we expanded upon them. We looked at the physical and the soft work environment. So everything from lighting and heating. Who wants to work in the cold and in the dark, right? Unless you're a vampire, right? That's fine. And life outside of work, we don't just wipe our feet and come into the office and say we're fine. We carry through those arguments we may have had with our loved ones. So it affects us. So we capture those and we look at some of the elements like care of younger and older family members. We've naturally got the psychological health and the physical health. They are completely core tenets to flourishing everywhere we've gone. That's great. And then you've got job satisfaction. Now, there are two fundamental problems we found. Number one, organizations aren't measuring most of this. If you can possibly imagine, a whole bunch of this information is completely missing. And that's even if they're accurately collecting that. So organizations are working in the dark. The second aspect that they're not doing quite right is even when they're telling you that they've got this, actually, they've got the well-being provider there, the occupational health provider from somewhere else, EAP from somewhere else, culture from somewhere else, and they're not bringing the data together. And if you can't bring the data together, you don't know what's correlating with what. So it's, again, back to guesswork. It's a tick in the box, but it's an empty tick. Or even worse, it's an empty box. So we found that the full picture was, in organizations today, was woefully under represented. So in my journey, one day I came across a wonderful article that Bain had published in Harvard Business Review. And I'm just going to walk you through this really quickly, so not to overwhelm you, but they talked to 250 plus managers and looked for the attributes that managers had found in their higher performing staff. And so they asked them about these attributes and they recorded them and quantified them. And so if you look at their classification, it's the first three they classify, and I'll walk you through the top two. People are satisfied at work when they have a safe and secure work environment. They have protection from bullying and harassment, a good health record, They've got policies that they work with that are robust. Bureaucracy is managed. Efficiency is commended. Good knowledge about the training, the tools, the products, and people around them, and adequate and competitive levels of remuneration and reward. But there are those people who are a little bit higher value to managers in the system. They're what they call engaged. These people feel belonging and actively part of a high-performing team. They're independent, they experience personal growth, they're emotionally invested, and they deliver tangible results. They really make a positive, noticeable impact. But there were people who were beyond that, even more so appreciated by the managers. Those people, they call them inspired. Now, I look at engaged and inspired that you come to work to give, to be engaged. But you come to work to take because it's such a brilliant environment to be in. You're so inspired by it, you want to breathe it in. These are people who obtain a sense and a meaning and an inspiration from the company. They're motivated by the leadership. They'll really push the hard yards to connect with that vision. And they really want to be part of that innovation group. They're stable work-life harmony. They're healthy. And they feel like they're really getting a rewarding career. Now, here's what the Harvard Business Review article said. They quantified that dissatisfied people are basically delivering 71 cents in the dollar. And the minimum you want people at work is satisfied. They're delivering $1 value that's on par. But you can go higher. You can actually have engaged people that deliver nearly 1.5 times as much to the dollar. And you've got people who are delivering nearly 3 times as much. And if we are honest and ask ourselves, how many people do we know that live in the satisfied world? So whilst I was looking at this, something struck me. Everything that we're looking at within Shape, everything, doesn't just measure all of these tenets. They also measure further than this. And we know there are people who don't just stop at doing it themselves for themselves. They go on to select and build and stimulate amazing teams. They've got a real connection with the purpose. They're progressive. They counsel people. They drive those skills. They build trust of people around them. Those people are delivering even more. But if we can get the distinguished level, and these are people, they must be the biggest leaders in the world, right? Well, not necessarily. They're hidden amongst us, by the way. We just got to find them. The signals are there. And that's what Shape's finding. These people are creative and game-changing. No is not in their vocabulary. They're disruptive. They're inclusive. They're collaborative. They're educative. Sounds a lot like higher performing people, right? It sounds a lot like the kind of people we want at work. It also sounds a lot like Flourishing, by the way. So we found Flourishing and performance was highly synonymous. So we created a system that measures that. So today, what have we done? We've created a survey, 100% confidential. We get asked this all the time. Is my information safe? We live in 2024. We can put people on the dark side of the moon. We can absolutely make sure that the data is going to be safe. We spent a lot of years on researching what are the perfect questions for the perfect factors that link to the perfect scores. And I'm really proud to say this is what got me connected into the group. For the first person, it was actually Marie Gill. Marie responded to my call because I felt strong enough that we had data so highly predictive. This is almost cancer grade prediction that we could call it out as being prescriptive, not even predictive. So each of these questions is highly trained. And then we provide instant results. Now, something that I found as a big flaw in the survey world was we ask people for that dreaded quarterly staff survey for all this information, but what do we give them in return? A conversation, usually months later, which they're not really interested in. You know, we're living in the world where TikToks are delivered faster than our organizations can actually listen to our needs and certainly respond to them. So we had to correct that. So as soon as a person presses submit, we have to give them a response. And there's a little word in the middle that you can see over here, which we'll see a little later, flourishing. We actually label, I believe we're the first actually to label flourishing within our service. Fully comprehensive, and it's for everyone. It's for employees, it's for managers, and it's for those people who are the top tier leaders, the executives in the business. And so why are we doing this? To bring it right back. It's not just to get to flourishing, it's to solve some real concerns for businesses. There are people who are leaving. I spoke to somebody this week, you know who you are, and they told me this amazing bit of statistic that they're working with a company that's 48% attrition. Can you imagine that? That's not a business. That's destruction. Absenteeism, people aren't turning up. Mental health is a concern for them. And they're guessing. They think mental health is a concern. There's low performance. Do they have a work from home strategy that's working? Good luck, Amazon. Right? Productivity concerns. And again, when you ask them to define productivity, then they don't define it. And then insurance claims have gone up to 40% higher in the last year. These are real issues that companies are facing. So how do we connect flourishing through to solving these issues? And that's what we've been doing. So some quick principles, and we'll have a look at the real thing. So we're asking everybody in the system, in organizations, please embrace the tenets of flourishing. Understand the flourishing system. And if you go to our website, you will see that there is a very short read called The Book of Flourishing. Please get it. It's only 4 minutes, but it will help you understand our approach to the system. But the fundamental need in there is it's about giving and not just taking. Everybody's got to play their part. It's not just up to leaders to keep on pushing and prodding individuals. Everybody's got to play their part. We call that the contribution model. It's about giving back. And also, I have been evangelizing this forever. There is no such thing as the perfect destination. It's only the perfect journey. The real prize of flourishing is to be on a journey that is really worthwhile. It brings it back to the conditions and the behaviors. So I'll try to navigate us through to 1 or 2 reports first that we have created. And if you just bear with me a second while I do that, let me first of all see if I can come here. And hopefully you can see this still. This is just one of the reports that we've been developing. Here's an organization. They scored, I'm just going to narrate this very high level. They scored 85 out of 100. They're flourishing. That's wonderful. But last year, when we, actually it was 2022, near enough real data from a simulated company, they had people who were struggling, percentage of people were striving, and a number that were flourishing. So we can now break that down. These are near enough true participation and completion rates. We're getting nearly close to 90% participation rate in our survey, even for the larger cohorts. And for those people that come in, our first-time completion rates are heading close to 85% now. This is a 20-minute survey on average, and we're still hitting those numbers. So there's some secrets to what we've done to make that happen. We can count the number of teams. We can break it down into how many males and females there are. We can look at number of countries. We can break down the profile of where people are working from, and we can get right into the bands as well. That wonderful data that we collect, we're able to build these amazing stories. We can look at how much the scores have increased, or the volume, in this particular case, how many people have increased or decreased per band. So from here, you can look at number of employees by tenure. We can provide the top level stats in terms of the scores for each of the 12 areas we covered. We've got the ENPS. Companies are obsessed with ENPS. No, rightly so, because their bonuses reside on the back of that, by the way. We, I believe, are the first in the world to actually put numbers to each one of these 12 areas. If you just stare at this for a second, we are providing a work time loss metric for each of the 12 areas in aggregate. And alongside that, we're providing a dollar value or a currency value of your location to that. This is backed off onto the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 28 industries that we have trained this on, 40 countries around the world. So if you're an MNC, we felt it appropriate to help them really understand what's happening on par. That's what really for me has been a very, very difficult thing to try to do, is to articulate this complex data and to help organizations really dial into where are the real issues they're facing. And then we've got, let me just do a quick time check. Yeah, we've got how many people are depressed versus stressed. Two fundamentally different approaches from an intervention perspective. Yet organizations talk about we're dealing with mental health. It's not good enough to deal at the high level when you need to really make a difference. And then we can get right down to the detail. Every single one of the factors, they have been scored. We look at the improvements, the declines. And just because I've got to be really speedy now, well, I'm going to show you this. This one here is the story just about that one card you saw on bands. We're now digging deeper into each one of the areas. We can talk about how many bands there are, how many teams, how many individuals reporting to multiple managers. And then we can break down the scores by gender. We can break it down by number of people. And as you go down, I won't go through all of this, but you can get the idea that there's a lot of data just in one card. We are now dialing deeper with our science research team into breaking down a view, a much more sophisticated view of what's really happening in the organization. And then we have recently been getting very brave, because we're, I believe, one of the fastest organizations on the planet that can actually map back to building complex indices. This one here is measuring the belonging and index of a business. These are the top most correlating factors. And then finally, because like I said, we can do it in multiple different ways, it's all back to high performance. What are the factors that are helping an organization and their people perform really well or not? And so I've got just a few minutes. Just bear with me a second while I just dial back into my portal here. And I just want to show you what the real thing looks like from a portal perspective. So I want you to please imagine that you have completed a survey because you've been invited in by the organization. And as soon as you press submit, you get this wonderful looking report over here. I'll just narrate just a few areas here because it's quite rich. I scored 78. This is my personal report right there. I'm striving.
Allie, excuse me. Could you zoom in just a little bit?
I absolutely can. I think I can. There we go. Is that a little bit better?
What does everyone think? My
Yeah.
eyes are the best, so okay. Thank you. Yeah.
So yeah, so here's my personal report. This is my dashboard that I would come to immediately after seeing my survey. We would hold back some information until all the information from across the various people participating in the survey is in. But generally speaking, you'd get a lot of value from here straight away. So I scored 78. I'm striving. So here's how we score Flourishing: 80 plus. Striving is 60 to 79, or I'm struggling. And we provide these little tidbit insights to help keep our system nice and clean, however, provide information where it's required. I can yet contribute about 6 days worth of additional time per year. Because that score of 22 is still remaining, it's the equivalent of work time loss. So we present it in a positive way. If I look down here, points below 100 marker potential for improvement, you can tap into this. Time to gain converts your remaining score into time. And by optimizing every facet of shape, you can get that time back. One of my favorite lines down here, by the way. Remember, improving scores is a team sport. It involves you, your colleagues, and the company. There's no hero leadership here going on, right? And then what we've done is we can connect you and signpost you directly to your EAP service provider as well now. We can provide comparisons. You can get the headline scores here. Actually, on the mobile, I'm quite proud of this one. On the mobile version, you can actually just tap on each one of these and you can get the score right there. Really, really simple. So you can tell we spend a lot of time on the design elements over here. Now, I won't go through all of these, but essentially enough to say that I could click on Life Outside of Work over here, and this will take me right through. I scored 58. I'm struggling. I want to know why. So actually, I can go to the score, go from high to low, and I can now look at what the score was for each area. I can hover over and I can understand. I've got a great support network of family and friends who help me in times of need. That's the answer to the question. One of my bugbears has been when I was observing employees in various systems that were not reminded, not just their results, they weren't given the results, but you have to go really hunt around for the data in a meaningful way, and that comes from the questions you answered. So we had to get that connection back again. And then you can see these little learn mores over here, and you can also see I can compare. So we've made it super easy for organizations to compare. Well, people to compare themselves to the company score. For some people and some companies we speak to and some leaders, this is really uncomfortable for them. But it's a tenet of flourishing, actually, is transparency and openness. You can only solve things if you actually avail it first. And so we also provide guidance to each individual. That score is a powerful score. And we provide what are the topmost, simplest things that you can do to help yourself in your flourishing, right there. And I'm going to use a different example over here for a second. If I just come down here and let's go to physical health, for example. So I'm doing great. But my team of 13 people are struggling. What happened here? Let's have a look. They're not eating enough fruits and veg per day. Exercise isn't so great. So this score is 17, 28 for smoking. So we've got a bunch of smokers here. Alcohol consumption is pretty good. And we're actually seeing an interesting trend, actually. Alcohol consumption, most of certainly the Western part of the world, Asia, we've got to dig deeper into a little bit more. Attitudinal trends. Sleep, 26. Do you feel tired due to lack of sleep? So now I can try to do something about it. And if I can come over here to nutrition, I'm getting guidance as a manager. The number of managers I speak to say, well, what can I do? I can only tell my team so many things. And we actually say to them, well, how many scones and donuts are you eating in the afternoon, right? Openly in front of your team. So we got to help managers and leaders of teams understand what they can do. And so we do that as well. And then, guys, we also do it for executives as well. We also tell the executives what they can do and how they can play their part at the policy level. And it's almost like a really, really simple checklist. And everywhere you go, really simple, you can keep on going back and checking back. What are the contributing factors to that score? So just a quick headline metric for the company. We are dialing now into diversity statistics, what the headline statistics look for time, but for nobody else, but just for the management team, we provide a breakdown view of those metrics. What's that insurance risk? What's that risk of losing staff? What does that mean for your business? We're putting some real dollar value against that as well. So this is one way, not the only way, to look at flourishing. And the final piece I'll show you is we've started to actually dial right down. And if I just come back just a little bit over here, there we go. We can really get down into what the question was and what the score is right there. And then we've started to build, let's have a look. Let's go to job level and see what that brings up. Anything that is a privacy concern will automatically get suppressed. And then we can dig into the data right there. And you can see where you need to dial in. We can even apply second level filters now and dig into the data right here. So males versus females right there. co-worker dynamic. Now I know where I need to put my attention. I will pause. I can see there's some questions that have come in. Thank you so much for your time so far. I hope that's been enlightening as to how we've approached one way to come and address and drive flourishing for employees in companies.
Thank you so much, Allie. I think one question is going to be popular, and that is, so what in fact did you do to drive the engagement scores up?
Okay. Can I ask who asked the question? Jill. Okay. Jill, great question. Jill, this was born out of the fact that when we went to organizations and asked them, who are the people you would like to participate, they would give us a list of the participants. And invariably, the list was wrong. And what we found was, other than the payroll systems, nearly all the data that was provided by every organization we spoke to, beyond 30 plus people, errors in spelling mistakes and email addresses, you wouldn't believe the number of issues we had. And if we're providing an accurate report to the manager of a team, and you're basing it on data that's already dirty, how do you solve that? So we asked ourselves another profound question: how can we actually just get the information from the people? They know who works for who. Let's just ask them. And we found some wonderful, amazing things. There's an educational institution that came back and they all put and I say all, but the majority of them by far put down the wrong managers. They actually didn't know who they reported to, right? Who would have known? And so what we've done by accident is by asking two questions. And there's your secret. Number one, who do you report to? Give us the email address. Number two, who reports to you? Now we've got a verified and validated, because each person that comes in can only come into that system if they come in and do the survey. We actually then email that person and say, hey, Jill, Ali's doing the survey and he gets these benefits. You're invited. It's entirely up to you if you want to come. But would you please validate this? And that's what drives the scores up as well at the same time. That took us 2.5 years of refinement, and it's using the same tech stack under the hood that Facebook uses, by the way. So just looking down the questions, thank you, Desiree. That's really kind of you. Sorry, Karen, could you help me a little bit, because I think I pretty much suck at reading all of these in order. I'm just trying to work.
So some of this was just commentary, like, wow, this is impressive, and like the actionable dashboard. And okay, so Yuna, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the amazing presentation. And actually, this is my first time to joining this call, so I'm so inspired by this initiative. I have like three kind of question. One is, was there any resistance from employee to disclose their situation? And second question is, any measurement on disability? Because I know some people are like struggling to what to share, how much share with other people. And third question is, was there any optimal size of the number of employee to work with your team? Because I know there's a cost of the services. So what is your recommendation? Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Yuna. Great questions. Number one, was there resistance? Yes, absolutely, there is resistance. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. People feel uncomfortable. I'll tell you what they feel uncomfortable about. It's not us. It's a reflection, what I learned the hard way. It's a reflection of their trust and relationship with their own employer. Right? And I remember a couple of years ago, we had this one person on a team like this, and she said, I'm going to be brave enough and tell you, I will never give my employee my data. And it was just an instant response. That's great, because we're not your employer. That's why they hired us, right? So I think we still got to help people. And the reason is because for years they've gone through survey trauma, where they've given information, nothing's happened in return, and then all survey providers must be like all vehicles must be bad, right? So yes, we have to help and support with that, and we do that through the communication and a lot of reassurance. Your second question about any measurement on disability. You know, originally we come from the world of health. And so we really get into chronic diseases, and we get into now social value and social sustainability reporting. I'll tell you about that in a second as well. There's something quite empowering and powerful that we're doing at the moment. And the disability aspect we recorded, but then what happened when we took it out to market, what happened was we were getting challenged on, why does the staff survey need to know when that's the HR responsibility and it's private and confidential anyway? So unfortunately, we had to make some hard decisions and move that out. However, recently what we've been doing is we've been connecting our data to new regulatory level compliances. So we are in the process, as this recording, but in October of this year, 2024, we will be compliant with the People at Work survey in Australia. In Australia, you are mandated, if you have 6 or more people, to report your psychosocial hazard risk and make sure that you are both measuring and managing it. I'm glad to say with SHAPE, plus 14 additional questions, including burnout, we are now able to produce a 20-page report that the individual can take as their disclosure, responsibility, and evidence that they've actively managed it. In the same way, we're also connecting our data to other regulatory level and certifications as well. One example of that, I'll give you 2 examples by extension, actually. Social value and sustainability, from a people sustainability perspective, workforce management. This is now a regulated level compliance come from the Europeans. It's called the ESRS, European Sustainability Regulation. And that standard effectively mandates organizations to provide what we call double materiality. It's linking your workforce to the material impact they have. And organizations, large and small, are incredibly stuck. So we have been working with a variety of different, very clever groups and think tanks on how to connect that data. And we've got 60% covered from the get-go, from SHAPE. And we've got another 40% that we're covering in a clever way. Another very quick example there, just to really hammer the point home, the importance of connecting our flourishing ambitions with real world organizational needs. There is a wonderful group called the International Well-Building Institute, IWBI. If you look at wellcertified.com, they are certifying whether this space, this building, is good for the occupants inside of it. Is it good for the well-being? So we are now pre-approved by Well to provide certified points towards their particular standard as well. And in much the same way, we've got a lot of stealth development going on where we are connecting SHAPE data, as powerful as it is, to real evidence that can be provided all the way through to where we've now got people telling us that they're using SHAPE data to apply to the B Corp and Fair Work Charter in the UK. So it's wonderful to see that we're contributing in a meaningful way. And the last one, the optimal size and number of employees. You know, I used to say it could be anywhere that you could get anonymity and overcome and manage. But then I learned Flourishing's for everyone, so let them just come in. So we're now helping companies. In fact, we're about to onboard a company on Monday with just 6 people. We've done it for 11 people, 12 people. We've done it for hundreds. We're getting into thousands now. So yeah, getting there.
Thank you. Miriam, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. First time attendee as well. Appreciate being here. FAWalikhan, you had me at hello, if you will, or at the moment that you said high performance faster, because definitely that is one of the challenges from a people leader perspective, is how do you justify investments, right? And how do you get there? One of the concepts of engagement in particular was always a tie to quality. So in a SaaS company, is the quality of your product, better in certain groups that are more engaged, more flourishing? Does the study offer any kind of insights there? And then the second question, DEI in the US appears to be somewhat under attack, where the focus on DEI is being seen as anti-business. You're not supporting my business if you're too focused on that. And how do you see this, the data and the study supporting people, leaders, making those business cases?
Can I just answer the second one first, and then we'll come back to the first one? So you're right, and I don't agree with what's happening in America. I'm a Brit, so I can say it quite safely, right? There is a lot of power in inclusion. And why not have diversity? The world is all different shades of a color. And I think we've got caught up in the political nature of, the debate. The reality is that we don't get involved in that conversation. So we're finding that this index is actually in demand, certainly here in Europe, quite easily, not a problem. In the States, what we do is we break it down. So we're being asked to look at more the equity aspect in a safer way. But what has really worked quite well is get straight down to the point, are my people performing? The higher performance index actually comes from the correlations of which factors point us towards, and the strongest correlations towards ultimately those factors that give them the highest score, but within the context of actually delivering productivity. So when we look at flourishing and we look at performance and productivity, let's just break those three down. When you flourish in the conditions and the behaviors, you are absolutely enabled to perform to your best possible capability. Now, you're enabled, whether you want to do it, is also innate. So we capture some of that data too in order to bring that to the fore. And there is a lag effect, but you eventually get to a point where you can therefore be productive. So what we've been doing has been focusing on how do you make the people metrics your leading metric, so you don't have a lag effect, but you get ahead of the game so you can use your predictive measures to identify where to go. And maybe one useful articulation to your first question is the faster element actually is not just marketing. There's actually a really powerful algorithm that sits behind that. So we ask ourselves a lot of questions, as you can imagine, right? So we asked ourselves, I've got all this amazing data, and I wonder what the relationship between each of these data points is. And then we connected that to another question we had. Naturally, what we all tell our people to do is focus on the weakest areas, go to your weakest scores, which is statistically the correct way of working. You don't go to your topmost areas and drive them up even higher. It's harder as the incline goes up, right? So focusing on your weakest areas, we asked ourselves the question, but what if you actually wanted to get the highest score? What would you do there? And so what we found was, by answering that first question, what's the correlation and strength between certain behaviors and certain conditions being improved? What actually else gets solved along the way? What's the knock-on effect? So I'll give you an example. Let's do it by way of example. When you sleep well, you have more energy. Eventually, you get enough energy to say, I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to exercise more. So the probability of exercising improves. If you exercise more, my body's my temple. I'm not going to feed kind of poor kind of pizza and burgers. I'm going to eat better than that. So your probability of eating goes up, right? Eating better goes up. That then has a knock-on effect on to better stress response, right? So your dopamine, your oxytocin, etc. That then has a better relationship level chance. There is a knock-on effect. You can literally see it in the data. So we call out in our recommendations, what is the single one thing, if you did nothing else, that you could do that would have a better knock-on effect onto the majority of the scores? And it gives you, so the 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 10 times faster. We're now getting, with the larger data sets, up to 35 times faster. It is getting out of control because the data is now starting to dance even more. So we're having to put limiters on place, and that's where the marketing comes in place. We limited it at 10 because we get people who just say that's not true, but statistically it's correct. Does that help answer the question? Did I do a fair job in answering the question?
You did a perfect job. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, great. Kimberly, go ahead.
I think your stats nerd rabbit hole that you just went down answered most of my questions. And my question did have to do with are all measures weighted equally, and how or if on the back end you've addressed those interrelationships and the relative impact of each of the measures. And like I said, I think you've answered that in large part, because I was thinking of a very similar example, that, if somebody has a chronic illness, for example, it's probably the overarching, not probably, but it may be the overarching factor that influences all of the others negatively.
Yeah, Kimberly, you're spot on. Actually, we've equiweighted all the factors, but then we're now morphing and changing them through the process of actually getting to a recommendation level. What we expect over time as we get more and more data is that we'll get stronger in our conviction, our belief, and then we've got to find a way to articulate it. That's the marketing challenge. The interesting thing here, however, is when you look deeper, nobody on the planet has brought this kind of data set across these domains together in one single place. So now there's a separate study that we're doing on how much of the culture is actually really eroding psychological health, and how much of the environmental factors are actually affecting the manager's style. We can now start to interrogate those relational aspects and come up with a whole different strategy that's not been looked at before. And this same approach, what we found is some really, really interesting and bizarre things, and we're not quite sure on how to articulate them yet. But I've got to be careful how I say this, especially because I'm being recorded, but how do we help individuals perform doesn't necessarily come down to invest in mental health, because it could be coming down to a whole different proxy. If you solve that over there, you've naturally solved this over here. In fact, you've got a better chance. And I'll give you a really simple example. The number of organizations we're now going to, and I'll say it really simple because we're all adults here, and hopefully adults only see this, is solve the asshole managers in your business. They know what they're doing, and you know what they're doing. You're just ignoring it. Solve it. Because that thing over here you want to solve is only going to get solved when you solve that over there. We're now able to connect that up together, and they've not got anywhere to run because the data's their data, it's their story. So we've got to be brave. And if we really, really want to get people to flourish, we must have those brave conversations. So we found an empowered way to do that, but we're finding, you'll be glad to know there's no profanity in the reporting. It's as soft as we can make it.
I think you buried the lead, Allie. That was the best part. Solve for the asshole managers in the business.
We
Plus,
need
plus,
a
plus.
follow-on meeting, Karen, just on that topic.
Yeah. I mean, this is just a perfect soundbite, I would say. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Allie. I think what we all appreciate about what you're doing is that you are offering this very comprehensive, rigorous, precise tool that integrates and addresses individual behaviors as well as the systemic infrastructure conditions where people need in order to ultimately thrive. And it is so complicated. So super grateful for you to be here. Any other questions before we wrap up? Ellie, I put your contact info and your website and such in the chat, and I'll also put all of that in a follow-up email. If you aren't on my email distribution list, I'll put my email in the chat. So please message me if you want to be added. So have a flourishing day. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Allie.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Allie.
See you.
Thanks, Karen.
Everyone,
Good to see everyone.